The bark of the kika tree was powder dry when I set out from the village, flaking beneath my fingers like old paint. Dust sheets lifted from the path each time my sandals struck the ground, twisting upward and hanging in the air as if reluctant to fall. It was the third moon of the season of crackling, when wells sank so low you could empty them with a gourd. We had not heard thunder since the last equinox, and the only clouds visible were the distant palls of grass fires on the steppe. The elders had sent me to the shrine of divided lightning to beg for rain. They said I carried the right mixture of humility and stubbornness to coax the twins back into their appointed struggle. I suspected they simply wanted to be rid of my questions, but I went anyway, because our millet had begun to die. The shrine stood 2 days' walk beyond the salt flats, a narrow ravine whose granite faces bore carvings that glittered with embedded crystals. I arrived on the second dusk, my water skin all but empty, my tongue raw. In the stillness of that place I felt the hush that always precedes great storms, the way hair lifts on a forearm before the first drop falls. Yet the sky above me was a hard, pitiless blue. I knelt between the twin pillars, one veined with black tourmaline, the other streaked with milk quartz, and chanted the petition the elders had taught, a low, looping call that spoke of equilibrium, of rivers that knew their proper course, of fields ripening neither too quickly nor too slowly. When I finished, there was no reply but the whisper of hot wind in the rocks. I closed my eyes, nearly faint with disappointment. A rasping voice said, "Child, did you come to watch or to remember?" I started so violently my teeth clacked. A grey-braided woman sat on a ledge I swear had been empty a heartbeat earlier. Her skin was cross-hatched with scars that shimmered like mica, and her gaze held the same patient weight as the mountains behind her. "To remember, I suppose," I managed. "Very well," she said, swinging her legs over the drop with the ease of someone half her age. "Then sit and listen. Memory is the first rain." I did as told. She introduced herself as Amarena, keeper of the Archive of Storms, although I saw no books, only the fretwork of chiseled lightning that ran along the gorge walls. She told me each groove was a story hammered into stone by thunder itself. When I confessed ignorance of the twins beyond the nursery rhymes, she inclined her head in a manner neither pitying nor amused, only vigilant, like a physician lifting a cloth from a wound. "This," she said, touching the quartz pillar, "is the bone of Setki, the severed storm, and that," her finger alighted on the dark mast opposite, "is the loam of Shemach, the buried cloud. They are the Thunder Twins, the duelists with sky-forged chains. Do you know why they fight?" "To balance drought and flood," I said, reciting the line every child knew. "Each season they contest until one gains the upper hand, yet never wholly wins." Amarena nodded. "A summary, but summaries are rations. You came for full meal. The dryness you flee and the deluges you dread are not accidents. They are blades forged by the twins' quarrel. Understand the blades and you may parry them." She gestured, and the ravine darkened though the sun was still high. Shadows lengthened into patterns resembling links of chain, and I smelled distant rain, sharp as crushed basil. "In the elder epoch," Amarena began, "the sky was a great cistern without spigot or lid. Waters collected until their weight warped the heavens, life below drowned in eternal deluge. From that chaos were born two beings, identical in visage, but opposite in hunger. Seteki craved stillness, the restful hush after lightning. Shemach lusted for noise, the roar of torrents upon stone. They saw in each other a mirror and an adversary. Their first argument cracked the sky into seasons, but arguments like river-carved channels. To keep their feud from shattering creation outright, they agreed to bind themselves." Her hand swept across the gorge. Veins of quartz flared, creating the illusion that the stone itself harbored inner lightning. They journeyed to the heart of the stratosphere where iron is born from frozen starlight. There they forged chains whose every link contained a promise, never to let drought reign unchecked, never to let flood consume unchallenged. Once every half-year they meet at the horizon's rim and wrap the chains around their wrists. They duel until the balance tilts. Victory is never total. The chains ensure stalemate, yet in the tussle, rain or dryness spills earthward. She paused. That is the tale you think you know. But stories calcify. The truth keeps dripping. To truly remember, you must glimpse what lies behind the rhyme. The ravine floor rumbled. Dust spiraled upward, forming two silhouettes of swirling grit. They elongated until they stood taller than the kika trees back home. One figure gleamed pale, threaded with silver sparks. Seteki. If Amarena's pillar was trustworthy, the other was dark, flickering with internal ember shemach. They faced each other, and between them hung twin coils of chain that glimmered like molten meteorite. Though I knew they were illusion, my mouth tried further, my heart jackhammered. Amarena spoke hardly above a whisper, but her words rode the tremor. Seteki speaks. Sister Shadow, the aquifers rise, the people drown, yield your pull. Shemak replies. Brother Echo, the earth cracks, the seeds perish, yield your draw. These entreaties repeat, each twin claiming justice, neither abandoning desire. At last they wrap themselves in their own chains. See how the links bite their wrists. They lash, they swing, each strike a covenant. Where Shemak's chain lands, clouds congregate. Where Seteki's strike, vapor flees. Thus the duel pours out into our realm, transmuted into weather. The chain figures moved in slow arcs. When their lengths collided, sparks showered, tumbling into the ravine as glowing motes that hissed on sand. Some sparks winked out, but others hardened into tiny crystals shaped like teardrops. Amarena collected several, pressing them into my palm. They were cool despite having just been born of fire. These are memory seeds, she said. Plant them in your village well. They will teach the water its place. I asked how such small things could remedy an entire season's wrongness. Her laughter rippled like a gentler thunder. You measure power by size, as children do, but consider, a single thought can drown or save a kingdom. Still the figures clashed. Seteki hurled a length of chain that coiled around Shemak's ankle, pulling dark fluid from the air which hardened into cubes of brittle ice. With a wrench, Shemak countered, flinging droplets that became steam, searing bright. The gorge echoed with impacts that sounded like distant drums. Yet I noticed that neither twin's visage showed hatred, only fierce resolve. They were siblings simultaneously tearing apart and holding together the seam of the world. How long will they fight? I whispered. Until they are tired and never a moment longer, Amarena said. Exhaustion is the brake on divinity. As if hearing her, the twins staggered. Seteke's silver gleam dulled. Shemak's embers dimmed. They released the chains, which drifted above them in a ragged infinity symbol. A hush descended. Neither the parching stillness I had felt in my village nor the suffocating humidity that sometimes gripped the marshlands, but a suspension of all extreme. Then, with surprising tenderness, the twins touched palms. A pulse radiated outward, and the chain dissolved into a fine mist that rained very lightly over the ravine. I caught a droplet on my tongue, sweet, startlingly cold. The duel concludes, Amarena said. Balance is reset, but do you see? The outcome can tilt toward either dryness or flood depending on the witnesses. Witnesses? I echoed. The world below is jury to their conflict, she explained. Each season, prayers, songs, and silences accumulate, adding weight to one side. Despair tilts the duel toward excess, pleading without faith, or rage without reverence. Hope, discipline, and shared memory keep the chain centered. That is why your elders sent you. They needed a mind still elastic enough to carry fresh memory seeds. I stared at the crystals in my hand. But our fields are already withering. It may be too late. Late is not the same as lost, she said. Return quickly. Cast the seeds into your driest well, and speak the chain's promise aloud. Then teach others this story, not the clipped rhyme. The more who remember, the lighter the burden on the twins. They will feel it the next time their chains cross. She pressed 2 fingers to my forehead. A cool jolt coursed through me, filled with storm scent and the rumble of clouds. My vision blurred, and when it cleared, the gorge had emptied. No swirling giants, no glow, only the carved pillars, quiet as bones. Amarina remained, but she now seemed half made of cloud herself. One more thing, she said, voice remote. Balance does not mean symmetry. Some seasons must lean dry, others wet. Acceptance of variation is part of the covenant. Do not demand perfection. Demand harmony. I bowed, thanking her, though words felt brittle. I left before dusk truly claimed the ravine, following a route she marked by scattering those tear-shaped crystals like breadcrumb stars. Each glinted even after sunlight faded, so I walked through the night, swift as urgency itself. The next afternoon, I reached the outskirts of my village. The air felt marginally cooler, a breeze carrying a scent of loam rather than dust. I hurried to the central well whose stones had grown powdery white. People gathered, faces drawn with disappointment they had not yet shaped into blame. Without ceremony, I dropped the crystals into the well, hearing faint chimes as they struck the bottom. Then I recited, or perhaps relived, Amarina's account. The twin pillars, the forging of chains, the alternating strokes of ice and steam. The villagers listened at first from courtesy, then from curiosity, and finally from hunger. By the time I spoke of the twins, touching palms, even the most skeptical leaned forward, eyes shining. When I finished, we peered down the well. At first, nothing. Then a glimmer, as though silver fish swam in depths previously dry. A trickle echoed. We pulled up the bucket, half full of cool, clean water. A gasp rippled through us like massed birds taking flight. But one bucket does not rescue a harvest. So we worked quickly, watering the millet roots before the sun sank. Next day, thin clouds gathered, parting just enough for warmth, but blocking the cruelest glare. By week's end, the first long rumble of thunder rolled over the horizon. I kept planting memory seeds. Amarian had said a single set would suffice, yet the ground around the well began sprouting crystal slivers on its own, as if the water remembered her better than I did. Children collected them, wearing them on strings against their chests. Elders asked me to recite the story nightly. The more I told it, the more details surfaced. The exact number of links in the chain, the notes embedded in Setek's lightning, the scent of Shimak's rain. Sometimes I wondered whether I embellished, but each variation felt less like invention and more like revelation. When the season of crackling turned to the season of overflow, we did not panic as in past years. We left offering bowls along the riverbanks carved from the same quartz veins as the shrine pillars. The river swelled, licked the bowls, and receded. Our houses stood firm. Our fields drank deeply but did not drown. Some said it was luck. Others credited the memory seeds alone. Yet most had come to accept Amarina's lesson. Equilibrium demands participation. News drifted from other villages. Some suffered flash floods, others endured dust devils. We offered them seeds and story both. A few scoffed, crystals and tales against the brute force of weather. But those who accepted found their fortunes shifting. It was not instant salvation. It was alignment, a nudging rather than a shove. 3 seasons later, word reached me that the shrine of divided lightning had vanished. Traders claimed a landslide buried it. Nomads insisted they searched the ravine and saw only unbroken cliffs. Fearing Amarina lost, I journeyed back. I found the gorge blocked by a single colossal slab of stone, smooth as river-worn jasper. No pillar, no carvings, no scar. Yet when I pressed my ear to the slab, I heard distant chiming, like chains striking in slow motion. I left a coil of woven grass as tribute and returned home heavy with wonder. That night, the twins visited in dream. They were smaller now, almost human-sized, their eyes ringed by equal parts fatigue and gratitude. Sateki's voice sounded like wind passing through reeds, Shemek's like water on a drum. They spoke in overlapping phrases, but I understood. Your memory steadies the links. Your people's trust smothers the rust. Keep telling. I woke before dawn, heart pounding as though I had run miles. Outside, a soft rain fell, gentle enough that individual drops could be counted if one had patience. Each drop struck the roof with a note, forming a melody not unlike a Mary's laugh. Over years, the story branched as living tales do. Some tellers emphasized the forging of the chains, others the compassion in the twins' final embrace. Children added verses where the chains became serpents guarding the horizon. Grandmothers wove cloth whose dye patterns mirrored quartz and tourmaline veins, explaining that wearing such cloth reminded the body to yield and restrain in equal measure. Did these variations diminish the myth, I wondered, until I remembered Amarena's words. Stories calcify, the truth keeps dripping. Variation was not dilution, but irrigation, letting the tale flow where needed. I grew older, became an elder myself. My knees complained in cold weather, my eyes blurred at dusk. Yet each equinox I still trudged to the well, dropping a fresh shard if one had formed, telling whoever gathered the full account. The cistern sky, the mirrored siblings, the jewel that is both conflict and choreography. Some seasons we teetered on the edge of flood, others drought. Never again did we collapse entirely into either. That is not to boast perfection. Storms breached roofs, heat killed saplings, but we had tools beyond lament. One particularly bleak dry season, a teenager full of the itch to reject whatever came before, challenged me during the telling. If the twins are so mighty, he said, why suffer at all? Why don't they simply agree on ideal weather forever? His peers nodded, hunger and frustration sharpening their silence. I smiled, seeing in him the earlier version of myself who had set out across the salt flats. Because stasis is another name for death, I answered. The twins duel not to win, but to move. Rivers need banks, yes, but they also need current. Soil needs sun, but it also needs darkness to rest. The chains do not imprison. They choreograph motion, preventing both chaos and paralysis. Our role is to watch, remember, and, when necessary, tug ever so slightly toward the middle. I expected further protest. Instead, he lowered his gaze, perhaps hearing thunder in his own chest. We carried water together that evening, and he asked questions no longer barbed. The following equinox, a traveller from beyond the desert brought news of lands where torrential storms never ceased, drowning forests into bogs. She asked if we possessed charms or magics. I gave her 3 crystals and the tale, not the short rhyme, but the layered, breathing version. She promised to carry it onward, and I knew the twins would feel the new witness at their next bout. I sometimes dream of Amarena, though I never again saw her waking. In one dream, she sits upon that vanished ledge, chiseling new grooves as the twins spar above her. Memory is the first rain, she reminds me, tapping a finger on the stone. Each tap creates ripples across continents, summoning unseen listeners. I try to thank her, but she shushes me, nodding toward the horizon where 2 silhouettes clash, yet also cradle each other, bound and free. The chains gleam, links tempered by countless eyes turn skyward with something betwixt fear and awe. Call it respect, call it vigilance, call it love. When I wake, I stand beneath the awakening dawn and sniff the air. Whether dust or petrichor greets me, I say the covenant aloud, not too much, not too little. Not silence, not roar. Wrestle, twins, but do not break. Some mornings clouds form instantly, others the sun hammers down unrepentant. Either way, I do not despair. I have seen the jewel, held its sparks, planted its seeds. I have learned that balance is not a point, but a dance, one that requires partners in both sky and soil. I recall Amarena's parting wisdom. Acceptance of variation is part of the covenant. To live under a breathing sky, we must breathe with it. So when the first true storm of the season finally crashes, rattling my roof and drumming the earth into fragrant mud, I close my eyes in gratitude. Somewhere above the clouds, chains have crossed, siblings have bowed, and equilibrium tilts once more between drought and flood. I whisper thanks to the Thunder Twins, to the Keeper of Storms, and to every voice that remembers. Then I step outside, face upturned, letting cold rain and distant lightning stitch new lines of story across my skin, ready to be passed on when the earth again forgets its measure.